Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Friday, September 15th, 2023. President Joe Biden gives his support to the United Auto Workers Union in their first day of a strike against the so-called Big Three U.S. car-making companies, saying auto companies have seen record profits which have not been shared fairly with workers. Republican presidential candidates Ron DeSantis and Mike Pence seek the votes of evangelical Christians at two conferences in Washington hosted by the Family Research Council and Concerned Women for America. Mike Pence unveiling a four-part national pro-family strategy. Vice President Kamala Harris starts a series of rallies at colleges under the banner Fight for Our Freedoms Tour in an effort to engage young people in the political process as she runs for reelection with President Biden. Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson speaks at the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama on this 60th anniversary of the bombing that killed 4 black girls, urging Americans to confront what she says are uncomfortable lessons about race because she says it's dangerous to forget them. And White House National Security Advisor, previewing next week's UN General Assembly, gets reporters' questions about President Biden's request for more aid to Ukraine, now caught up in the larger fight in Congress over government spending, especially between competing House Republican factions. And Jake Sullivan confirms that the Ukrainian President, Volodymyr Zelensky, will be in Washington to meet with President Biden at the White House. About 13,000 auto workers, writes Associated Press, have walked off the job at 3 targeted factories after their union leaders couldn't reach a deal with Detroit's automakers. The United Auto Workers Union is seeking big raises and better benefits from General Motors, Ford, and Stellantis. They want to get back concessions that the workers made years ago when the companies were in financial trouble. A small percentage of the union's 146,000 members walked off the job at a GM assembly plant in Wentzville, Missouri, a Ford factory in Wayne, Michigan, near Detroit, and a Stellantis Jeep plant in Toledo, Ohio, at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time on Thursday. Reporting from Associated Press. President Joe Biden talked about the strike today at the White House.
I'll be very brief. I want to talk very briefly about the auto strike. I'd like to say a few words about the contract negotiations between the United Auto Workers and the Big Three auto companies. I've been in touch with both parties since this began over the last few weeks and over the past decade. Auto companies have seen record profits, including the last few years, because of the extraordinary skill and sacrifices of the UAW workers. But those record profits have not been shared fairly, in my view, with those workers. Just as the Treasury Department has released a report pointing out that the most comprehensive report ever dealing with how unions are good for both union workers and non-union workers and the overall economy. Unions raise workers' wages, they said, incomes, increase home ownership, increase retirement savings, increase access to critical benefits like sick leave and child care, and reduce inequality, all of which strengthen our economy for all workers. That's because unions raise standards across the workplaces and entire industries, pushing up wages and strengthening benefits for everyone. That's why strong unions are critical to a growing economy and growing it from the middle out, the bottom up, not the top down. That's especially true as we transition to a clean energy future, which we're in the process of doing. I believe that transition should be fair and a win-win, for auto workers and auto companies. But I also believe that the contract agreement must lead to a vibrant, made-in-America future that promotes good, strong, middle-class jobs that workers can raise a family on. Where the UAW remains at the heart of our auto economy, and where the Big Three companies continue to lead in innovation, excellence, quality, and leadership. Last night, after negotiations broke down, the UAW announced a targeted strike at a few Big Three auto plants. Let's be clear. No one wants a strike. Say it again. No one wants a strike. But I respect workers' right to use their options under the collective bargaining system. And I understand the workers' frustration. Over generations, auto workers sacrificed so much to keep the industry alive and strong, especially through the economic crisis and the pandemic. Workers deserve a fair share of the benefits they helped create for an enterprise. I do appreciate that the parties have been working around the clock. And when I first called them at the very first day of the negotiations, I said, please stay at the table as long as you can to try to work this out. And they've been around the clock, and the companies have made some significant offers. But I believe they should go further to ensure record corporate profits mean record contracts for the UAW. Let me say that again. Record corporate profits, which they have, should be shared by record contracts for the UAW. And just as we're building an economy of the future, we need labor agreements for the future. It's my hope that the parties can return to the negotiation table to forge a win-win agreement. To continue our active engagement, I'm dispatching 2 members of my team to Detroit, Acting Labor Secretary Julie Hsu and White House Senior Advisor Gene Sperling, both of whom have been involved up to now, to offer their full support for the parties in reaching a contract. The bottom line is that auto workers help create America's middle class. They deserve a contract that sustains them in the middle class. So thank you very much. That's all I'm going to say. Thanks.
Mr. President, at what point would you get directly involved in negotiations? Should Hunter get a pardon, Mr. President?
President Biden at the White House. Quick note about that question from the reporter at the end as the president was walking out about federal gun charges against his son Hunter related to allegations Hunter lied about illegal drug use when buying a gun several years ago. Hunter Biden's lawyer, Abby Lowell, telling ABC News' Good Morning America this morning that he believes the gun charges against his client will be dismissed before trial because he says the law is likely unconstitutional, citing a recent appeals court ruling that drug use alone should not automatically prevent someone from obtaining a gun. Back to the UAW strike, the White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre asked today about criticism of the Biden administration from the CEO of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce.
Quick thing, I want to get your reaction. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce president released a statement saying, and I'm going to read this, the quote, "The UAW strike, and indeed the summer of strikes, is the natural result of the Biden administration's whole-of-government approach to promoting unionization at all costs. For the 94% of American private sector workers not in a union, the costs are stacking up." I want to get your reaction.
My reaction is this. The president believes that collective bargaining works. That's what he believes, and we've seen that work. And it is important that workers are able to have benefits and wages so that they can raise their family. That's what the president has always talked about, whether it's his economic plan or in this instance, as we're talking about unions and making sure that workers, right, come together with the companies and have these businesses and have these win-win, hopefully, agreements. And so it's important that workers' rights, right, they have their rights, are able to ask for fair pay, fair wages. And that's what we're going to continue to say. That's why we believe the collective bargaining system works, and we have seen that happen, and it's important that we move forward in that direction.
White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre at a news conference at the White House. The UAW President Shawn Fain was on the picket line overnight at the Ford Assembly Plant in Wayne, Michigan.
Like they always say, when corporations fail, we take all the blame and we make all the sacrifice. When they're profitable, they keep all the profits. Those days are over. It's time we get our fair share. They made $250 billion in the last decade. They made $21 billion in the last 6 months. Our pay has went backwards. We got 6% pay raises over the last 4 years. Price of cars went up 30%. CO pay went up 40%. And these guys are paying the price. It's got to stop.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Who we are. Who we are. So we tell them. So we tell them. We are the union. We are the union. Mighty, mighty union. Mighty, mighty union. Auto workers union. Auto workers union. Ass kicking union. Ass kicking union. Come on, union. Union.
United Auto Workers on the picket line at a Ford plant in Wayne, Michigan, late Thursday night, joined by the UAW president, Shawn Fain. This is the first time in history that the UAW has struck against all of the Big Three automakers. GM's CEO Mary Barra was interviewed this morning on CBS News.
The union's been asking for up to a 40% pay raise. They want a 4-day work week, return of pensions, among other things. Why not just give them what they're asking for?
Because one of the most important things in my responsibility that I take very seriously, excuse me, is we have to make sure the company's going to succeed for the next 115 years. And that means we need to invest in the products you see around me. If we don't invest in new products and have products customers want to buy, That impacts the number of vehicles we build, which directly impacts how many people are part of our manufacturing team. So we need to be able to keep investing in new products. And right now we're at a peak because we're investing not only in next generation internal combustion engine vehicles to make sure the customer demand is still there, along with improving fuel efficiency, but also in brand new EVs. So this is a critical juncture where investing is very important.
General Motors CEO Mary Barra on CBS Mornings this morning. NBC News reports the United Auto Workers strike has the potential to become one of the largest work stoppages in the past 3 decades. But this UAW strike is a far cry from the humongous strikes of the 20th century, when more than 500,000 walked off their jobs in multiple strikes to fight for better workplaces. NBC News also listing the largest strikes in U.S. history, and the top one in 1946, an estimated 750,000 steelworkers going on strike for more than a month. On Wall Street today, the Dow down 288, NASDAQ down 217, S&P down 54. From the New York Times, former President Donald J. Trump and Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida are set to collide again on Friday as the leading Republican presidential candidates make dueling appearances at 2 different influential social conservative gatherings in Washington. The events, a Pray, Vote, Stand summit organized by the Family Research Council, and a leadership summit of the Concerned Women for America Legislative Action Committee, will be a showcase for the evangelical voters with whom Mr. DeSantis urgently needs to make inroads if he has any chance to catch up with Mr. Trump, who holds a wide lead in most primary polls. The decision for both men to come to the nation's capital highlights the significant role that Christian conservatives will play in the 2024 nominating contest, beginning in Iowa, where white evangelicals are projected to be a sizable share of the likely electorate in January's caucuses. That was from the New York Times. Ron DeSantis spoke this afternoon at the Concerned Women for America conference.
We are gathering today as our country suffers under a national malaise, the likes we have not seen since the 1970s under the administration of Jimmy Carter. We see inflation that has skyrocketed. Simply affording groceries has become difficult for hardworking families. Forget about being able to afford a home or to afford a new car. And we know that crisis was driven by the people in Washington, D.C. who borrowed, printed, and spent trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars over the last 5 or 6 years. Our debt is now in excess of $32 trillion. I remember when I was a congressman, got elected in 2012, it was $16 trillion. And we thought that was a big deal. And yet just in the last 5 or 6 years, they've added more to the national debt than we did in over 200 years as a country. We know that's not sustainable. We also know it's not sustainable to have a country that cannot even control its own borders, to have a country where drugs are pouring in at such an extent that we are losing over 100,000 Americans every year from drug overdose deaths. We see federal agencies unaccountable to the people, wield their power in ways that are weaponized, where they go after disfavored groups, like a parent going to a school board meeting in Northern Virginia, a pro-life activist like Mark Houck, even circulating memos saying that observant Catholics are potential terrorists. We see cities floundering under leftist government, crime out of control, Soros-backed prosecutors allowing the inmates to run the asylum. Our education system has continued to decline. People like the teachers' unions and the left, they want to use our schools to indoctrinate our kids instead of educating our kids. And we see what goes on in the schools with social experimentation, like trying to jam men into women's sports. We've seen the advent of woke ideology, and we've seen how that has captured and corrupted institutions throughout our country. They want you to believe that a man can get pregnant. They think it's appropriate to jam sexualized curriculum into elementary school classrooms. Even in our U.S. military, we see a political agenda. We see social experimentation, and we see our country weaker than at any time in our lifetime. And of course, one of our most foundational freedoms of all, the freedom to practice our faith, is coming under assault by leftist elites all across the country. Now, there is a lot of pessimism in the air given what we're facing, and I think that that's understandable. But I'm here to tell you there is a better way forward for this country, and that better way is not only possible, it is within our grasp if we make the right choices over these next 18 months.
Republican presidential candidate Ron DeSantis, also Florida governor, at the Concerned Women for America Summit in Washington. Mike Pence, also a Republican presidential candidate and former vice president, spoke today at the Family Research Council conference in Washington, presenting a plan he says will strengthen the American family and therefore the country.
I would submit to all of you there never has been a time when renewing American families has been more urgent. It's the family, and it's at the dinner table where we pass along our timeless values of faith and hard work and integrity and loyalty. I just finished a book with my middle daughter, Charlotte. A little story about our family and how we've been blessed through the years. The title of the book is Go Home for Dinner. Ronald Reagan said, all great social change begins at the dinner table. And Reagan was right. And the truth is, if we want to strengthen America, we have to strengthen the American families. Strong families make strong communities, and strong communities make a strong nation. That's why your willingness to come to our nation's capital today and to hear all the speakers that you hear is of such vital and timely importance. It's also why today I'm unveiling a national pro-family strategy that will put the American family first. A little bit later, or if you lose interest during my speech, you can go to MikePence2024.com and read all about it. But I wanted to come here to the Pray, Vote, Stand Summit and outline a plan to rebuild the American family. It's really in 4 parts. Number 1, we're going to encourage marriage, childbirth, and adoption with national policies in this country. Secondly, we're going to end the radical left's assault on our kids and reject the transgender ideology that's taken hold in our schools. Third, we're going to give parents in every state the right to choose where their children go to school, public, private, parochial, or homeschool. And finally, we're going to restore the sanctity of life to the center of American law in every state in the land.
Republican presidential candidate Mike Pence at the Family Research Council Summit in Washington. A press release from the office of Vice President Kamala Harris reads that she kicked off her national Fight for Our Freedoms college tour yesterday with a high-energy event in front of a full house of more than 1,400 students at Hampton University in Hampton, Virginia. She writes that after speaking with an overflow crowd that had gathered outside, the vice president participated in a moderated conversation with actor Terrence J. and discussed a range of issues that are impacting young people across the country. Here is one of the questions from the audience about gun violence.
So do we have a Sean Powell Jr. here? Is Sean here? Sean, how are you? Grab that mic.
That's Mr. Hampton.
Sean, what year are you?
I'm a graduating senior, sir.
Nice. And what school are you in?
I'm in the Buckman School of Business.
Love to see it. Sean, what is your question for Madam Vice President?
So, greetings, Madam Vice President. My name is Sean Powell Jr. I'm a graduating senior marketing major from Laurel, Maryland. And I just want to give you the warmest and sincerest welcome to our home by the sea.
Thank you.
And
thank you.
I serve as the 22nd Mr. Hampton University on this campus. And my question to you today is, gun violence is one of the most controversial and emotional issues in many cities and college campuses across the country. And with the debate often centering on whether regulations on an individual's rights to arms are an undue restriction on liberty, what can the government do to restrict access to certain guns, as well as implementing gun laws for America?
They can have courage, Mr. Hampton. They can have courage. So here's the thing. I'd like to ask for a show of hands. How many of you, starting in elementary school or after, had to have drills in schools around active shooters? I'd ask the adults, the older adults in the room, to take a look at that. Because I think that the people who are currently in elected office, who have the power to make decisions about this, don't understand what y'all have been through. They don't get it. They don't get the fact, and that's why I can't wait for you to continue in your role of leadership, because when you all start voting in your numbers, this is going to change. They don't understand that on the first day of school, as young as elementary school, that our children, when learning the name of their teacher, and that's where the bathroom are learning how to quietly hide if there's an active shooter in their school. I've had young people, students in junior high, younger, say to me, yeah, when on this issue, I don't really like going to fifth period. Why, sweetheart? Because there's no closet in that classroom. No. That's real. So while our children are supposed to be in class, being fed with information that opens up their minds to the wonders of the world, half of their mind is worried about whether someone might come busting in the door, threatening their life. This is a very real issue. On this issue also, I would say, Mr. Hampton, there is a false choice that is being sold, attempted to be sold, which suggests you're either in favor of the Second Amendment or you want to take everyone's guns away. That's a false choice. I believe in the Second Amendment. I also believe we need an assault weapons ban. We need background checks. We need red flag laws.
Vice President Kamala Harris at Hampton University in Hampton, Virginia on Thursday. First stop of what she is calling a Fight for Our Freedoms college tour that will last a month and include a dozen schools. Today, she was at North Carolina A&T State University in Greensboro. From her press release, she says the critical rights she will highlight on this tour include reproductive freedom, common sense gun safety laws, climate action, voting rights, LGBTQ+ equality, and teaching America's full story. A service today at the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama, on this 60th anniversary of the bombing by Ku Klux Klan members that killed 4 young black girls. USA Today reports the bombing became a symbol of the reality faced by black Americans in the fight to end segregation in what was at the time the most segregated city in the nation. Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, the first black woman to serve on the High Court, spoke at this service. The article says she warned Americans not to forget the atrocities of the country's past and advocated for robust education on black history for all children.
We must not shield our eyes. We must not shrink away lest we lose it all. The path we need to take, one of remembrance, knowledge, and understanding, is certainly not the easy road, but it is the only one that can guarantee our democracy's ultimate survival. And I am confident that just like generations of Americans before us, we are up to the challenge. Armed with our history, well prepared by our past, and secure in the knowledge of what we have been through and where we're headed, we will triumph in the valiant struggle to promote constitutional values and to obtain freedom and justice for all. In the time that I've been here, I am so pleased to see that Birmingham is already doing much of this important work. The commemorative week, of which today's memorial service is a part, not only preserves the history, it brings to life for a new generation the daily struggles and injustices of the not so distant past. Birmingham's efforts are part of that long arc bending toward justice, and I hope that they will be a model for similar efforts throughout the country. I will close on that optimistic note, for if nothing else, I have faith in our great nation. The people of this country have seen challenging times before, and still we rise. We will link arms and step forward together, past the hate and fear, beyond the darkness of division. Knowing what we've been through will only embolden us to lift ever higher the torch of freedom and fairness, justice and equality. And just as we always have, we will honor those 4 little girls and all of the historical figures who have paid the ultimate price for our freedom by vigorously upholding the Constitution of the United States and the fundamental principles of our union. We will embrace them, we will promote them, and we will protect them, even when it is difficult to do so, especially when it is difficult to do so. And through our efforts, with God's grace, we will continue to push humanity toward the light. God bless you and your families, and thank you for the honor of being here today.
Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson at the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama. This is the 60th anniversary of the 1963 white supremacist terrorist bombing that killed 4 black girls at that church. Returning to the USA Today article, it reads, at 10:22 a.m., the moment the bomb detonated 6 decades ago, the congregation read the names of those killed that day as bells tolled. The 16th Street Baptist Church had been a key mass meeting spot during the Civil Rights Movement and the target of frequent bomb threats. 3 Klansmen were eventually convicted in the bombing, but not until years later. Washington Today continues in a moment.
When citizens are truly informed, our republic thrives. Get informed straight from the source on C-SPAN. Unfiltered, unbiased, word for word. From the nation's capital to wherever you are. Because the opinion that matters the most is your own. This is what democracy looks like. C-SPAN, powered by cable.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast wherever you get your podcasts and on the C-SPAN Now mobile app. White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan confirmed today that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky will meet with President Biden at the White House next week, right after they both are in New York City for the United Nations General Assembly. This comes as President Biden is asking Congress for $24 billion in additional military, humanitarian, and financial aid for Ukraine to help that country's fight against Russia's invasion. And that emergency aid for Ukraine has now been tied up with the larger, complex, and so far unresolved issue of funding the entire U.S. federal government. Jake Sullivan was in the White House briefing room today.
The message that the White House believes that President Zelensky needs to deliver to Congress, particularly Republicans in the House, while he's in town, to convince them to continue supporting U.S. military assistance to Ukraine?
Frankly, I don't believe President Zelensky needs our advice to be an advocate for what Ukraine needs. He has proven over the course of the past 18, 19 months that there is no better advocate for his country, for his people, and for the urgent and continuing need for countries like the United States and our allies and partners to step up to provide the necessary tools and resources that Ukraine needs to be able to effectively defend itself. He will come do that this time as he has done before. He's had the opportunity in Kyiv over the course of the past several months to host both Democrats and Republicans from both the House and the Senate. So he is very much abreast of the perspective and the discussions that are taking place up on Capitol Hill. And I think he's looking forward to the opportunity not just to see President Biden here at the White House, but also to see congressional leaders from both parties to make the case that the United States has been a great friend and partner to Ukraine throughout this entire brutal war, and that the United States should continue to do that. We have confidence that there will be bipartisan support for this. I think President Zelensky does as well, and he wants to build momentum towards that as we head to the end of the month. Yeah.
To that point, how do you have that confidence? Given the showdown on Capitol Hill, how can the president give assurances to President Zelensky that there will be additional funding?
Look, President Biden doesn't build his Ukraine policy on assurances or promises. He builds it on delivering. And we have delivered multiple rounds of supplemental funding that passed with large bipartisan majorities. We believe, based on our consultations on the Hill, that there continues to be strong bipartisan support in both houses for continued funding because, frankly, Republicans and Democrats both recognize that the United States cannot, in its own naked self-interest, let alone the moral obligations we have, walk away from Ukraine at this critical moment. So we believe that whatever other toing and froing there is in the legislative context, that at the end of the day, the United States will be able to continue to deliver for Ukraine and continue to be able to lead a diverse coalition of countries that are also stepping up to deliver. I mentioned in my opening that Lloyd Austin is hosting another contact group meeting next week. And we expect to see other countries stepping up on air defense, on ammunition, on other capabilities increasingly, that they are sharing the burden, our European partners and others, alongside the United States. And we are showing that to the Congress to say this isn't just about the United States alone. This is about the United States with the free world and friends of the free world stepping up together to continue to deliver for Ukraine.
White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan with reporters in the White House briefing room. Story from the Times of Israel. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is preparing to take off for the United States early Monday, hours after the end of the Rosh Hashanah holiday, on a visit that will feature a series of meetings with world leaders at the UN General Assembly, but will still be far from what he'd hoped for. The highest profile sit-down will be the long-awaited visit with U.S. President Joe Biden in a format that is sure to disappoint the Prime Minister, who has been angling for a visit to the White House since he returned to office as head of a right-wing, far-right, and ultra-Orthodox coalition in late December. The Biden administration has held off on such an invitation amid massive protests and fierce opposition to the Netanyahu government's judicial overhaul bid, which Washington has repeatedly warned against. Instead, President Biden has sufficed with a Netanyahu meeting on the sidelines of the General Assembly next week. That was from the Times of Israel. The Israeli Prime Minister posted a video today about the Rosh Hashanah holiday.
To the Jewish communities around the world, Shana Tova. On the eve of the Jewish New Year, I want to wish all of us and all of you two things: unity and peace. Unity doesn't mean that we don't have arguments. We do. Israel is a vibrant democracy and will remain so. But we should always remember, as we seek to reach a consensus, that we are one people, one state, we have one army, and we have a shared past and a common future. If we remember that, if we keep in mind these basic truths, we'll have less division and more unity. And the other great opportunity we have is peace. We've already achieved a historic breakthrough with the Abraham Accords, peace between Israel and 4 Arab states, in addition to the peace treaties we had with Egypt and Jordan. But this year affords, as I hope, the promise of a great opportunity, peace with Saudi Arabia. That will begin to end the Arab-Israeli conflict and will also begin to foster a new relationship between the Jewish people and billions of Muslims around the world. These are my hopes for this year: unity and peace. I know you share that with me. May it be a blessing for all of us.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in a video. Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year holiday, begins sundown tonight. President Biden held a conference call with U.S. rabbis Thursday night, and according to a White House transcript, he reaffirmed his commitment to condemn and combat anti-Semitism at every turn. The White House press secretary Karine Jean-Pierre wished everyone a Happy New Year at her news conference today.
As Jewish communities in the United States and around the world prepare to gather at sundown for Rosh Hashanah, the President and the First Lady are extending their warmest wishes for a happy and healthy new year. Last night, the President spoke to over 2,000 rabbis across the country, wishing them a happy new year. To every Jewish family across America, Israel, and the world celebrating this evening and observing the high holidays ahead, Shana Tova.
White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre. The U.S. House and Senate are not in session today, but Congressman Chris Stewart, Republican from Utah, resigned from Congress effective today after 11 years as a member of Congress. He had announced back in May that he would be stepping down to help take care of his wife's health issues. And a month ago, he talked about it on a Salt Lake City TV station.
Talk about this decision to resign. I imagine it was not easy.
Yeah, it was actually very difficult. And then there was this added layer to it, and that has to do with my wife's health. Well, she's a very private person, and she doesn't want the whole world knowing. And as I think most of us feel that way. But she had a stroke about a year ago, and you know, as time went by, it just became more and more evident. It just was very unfair for her, for me to be gone all the time. And we reached a point, you know, kind of late spring where we thought, you know, I just probably shouldn't do it anymore. And you asked me what a lot of people ask me, you know, since making that decision, a very difficult decision. You know, I didn't want to leave Congress. I certainly didn't want to leave in the middle of a term. I really thought we could serve out the rest of this term. But we know it was the right decision, and I've never second-guessed it. Once we made the decision.
That's the question I asked you. Have you ever second-guessed that decision since it was made?
Not for a second.
So you're still on the right path doing exactly what you need to do.
Well, we feel like it was the right decision, and the right decision for the family. And, you know, there's still a lot of things to look forward to. But every once in a while, you know, we always say, hey, families first. A couple times in our life do we get to test that. And I mean, it really is true. And again, we feel very comfortable with our decision.
Congressman Chris Stewart, Republican from Utah, on KTVX-TV, Salt Lake City. On August 12th, his resignation from Congress is effective today. And from Associated Press last week, with strong backing from Utah's rural voters, a former staffer of Congressman Chris Stewart won a three-way Republican primary in a special election to succeed him after he resigns from office. Celeste Malloy, a Donald Trump supporter, defeated former state representative Becky Edwards in what was a tight race. The special general election to fill the seat is November 21st. And finally, on Washington today, in the U.S. Senate this week, between debate on government funding bills and confirming nominations, Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith, Republican from Mississippi, spent a few minutes paying tribute to Mississippi native singer-songwriter Jimmy Buffett, who died on September 1st at the age of 76.
Mr. President, I rise today to pay tribute to the remarkable life of a legendary native of Mississippi, whose music is synonymous with the spirit of summertime and enjoying life, Jimmy Buffett. Born in Pascagoula, Mississippi, Jimmy Buffett's journey began in the heart of the South. His music touches the heart of those well beyond Mississippi or the South, but there's no denying Jimmy's music embodies the very essence of the South with its warm hospitality, vibrant culture, and distinctive charm. Jimmy's early years were filled with the sights and sound of Mississippi, the sun shining over the Gulf of Mexico, and many other beautiful experiences of the South would later inspire some of his most beloved songs. But it was Jimmy's great appetite for adventure which ultimately propelled him to worldwide fame. He embarked on a journey that would take him to the Florida Keys, the Caribbean, and beyond those changes in latitudes. Amid more than 40 musical tours throughout his career, he channeled his talents into a diverse business empire and charitable works. As we reflect on the legacy of this son of a sailor, we cannot help but be inspired by Jimmy Buffett's unyielding commitment to following his dreams and embracing life. His songs transport us to sandy beaches where the stresses of life fade away. He reminds us that sometimes we all need to kick back, relax, and take a moment to savor the simple pleasures of life. As Jimmy would put it, it's 5 o'clock somewhere. In honoring Jimmy Buffett, we celebrate the man who, through his music, brought us with him on many of his adventures around the sun, from the Pascagoula Run to the shores of paradise, and we are all better for it. I have so much gratitude for the joy, laughter, and the inspiration that Jimmy Buffett brought into so many Americans' lives. His music is a timeless reminder that no matter where we come from, we can all find a bit of paradise within ourselves, and come Monday, it'll be all right. Jimmy Buffett is a true Southern storyteller who was generous enough to share his piece of paradise with the world. I have no doubt His legacy will continue to inspire generations to come. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith, Republican from Mississippi, on the Senate floor on Tuesday. Jimmy Buffett died 2 weeks ago. Earlier this year, the Librarian of Congress, Carla Hayden, included Jimmy Buffett's signature song, Margaritaville, in the latest batch of 25 recordings to be included in the National Recording Registry. That's a list of audio recordings that are, according to the registry, culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant and or inform or reflect life in the United States. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter word for word to get the stories Washington is talking about sent to your inbox every day. Subscribe at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night and weekend.